Hi everyone, and welcome to the Student Voice. I'm Riya Kachroo.
And I'm Becca Cohen. Today we have Dr. Toback, the superintendent of Wayne Schools, joining us to answer all of your guys' questions.
Over the past few weeks, Becca and I went around school talking to students and asked them, if you could ask any question to the superintendent, what would it be?
We chose some of the most asked questions from students, as well as some of our own, and want to ask you about them.
So Dr. Toback, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to speak with you about our school and start the school year off right.
Let's start with the questions from students directly. Our first question today is from senior Adriana Gianella.
Hi, Mr. Toback. My name is Adriana. We put so much funding into all of the extracurriculars for Wayne Hills High School, but we don't do as much funding for the equipment like the bleachers. So I was wondering why that is, or if we can start doing that.
Okay, so Dr. Toback, what do you think about this?
What I think about it is that the Board of Education Administration recognizes the problem, that the bleachers are older, they're getting close to the end of their useful life. So what the Board of Ed has done is ultimately we have about $12 million set aside, and hopefully either this summer or next summer, we'll be renovating the bleachers. We'll knock down the old bleachers and we'll be putting up new bleachers, along with maybe some other things that are probably needed in that area. So we're looking at a number of different options. So the plans aren't finalized, but we have the funding set aside, and we have some other things that we might be doing to really improve the athletic facility and to make sure those bleachers are up to par.
I think that's going to be really great too, because I know we all go to the football games,
Yeah.
and it can get very dangerous and scary because the bleachers will shake. But I think that's going to be really
Especially
great.
because all the students like to crowd in one
Yeah.
section of the bleachers.
Yeah.
So I think investing money into that and time is definitely beneficial for the students.
Well, we did upgrade the press box this year. So if you look at the press box, that looks really nice. It's like kind of brand new. But I do recognize it. I was at the North Bergen game, and I did see there was a lot of students there, which was really great.
Yeah.
But it's all in one section, so I understand what you're talking about.
Is this a problem that you're seeing at all of the schools?
I would say, well, the high schools are the only places that really have bleachers. But both of the high schools have stadiums that were built about the same time. And the bleachers last, maybe 50 years tops.
Yeah.
And so ultimately what happens is, even though they're made of metal, even though they're aluminum, they bend, they bow. Over time,
Yeah.
it's just, they come apart.
And we have crazy student
And you have
sections,
crazy,
so I'm
but-
sure that doesn't.
And really, really motivated fans.
Yeah.
right, that are having
Jumping
a good
doesn't
time.
really help keep the bleachers intact.
Probably in the best shape, right?
All right, let's hear from our next question.
My name is Megan, and I was wondering, why is the Wi-Fi so bad in the Commons, and can we please do something about that?
Okay, so Dr. Toback, what do you think about that?
I think that's really the first time I've heard about the Commons having a bad Wi-Fi connection or not enough Wi-Fi availability. So that's something we'll look into, and hopefully we'll get that fixed, because you need Wi-Fi in the Commons, and a lot
Yeah.
of people do their work there. So
Yeah.
that has to be fixed.
I think it's also more frustrating in the Commons because so many people have study there. Like I have a study in the Commons, so I'm sitting here trying to get my work done for about an hour, and none
Yeah.
of the Wi-Fi doesn't work.
Especially during lunch too, because sometimes you
Yeah.
have assignments due at 2:19 when the school day ends,
Yep.
and you have to do it at lunch.
Yep.
So, but
So
yeah.
we'll do what we can to get that work done.
Yeah, that would be great.
It's the first time I've heard about the problem, and like I said, I know the district has spent a lot on technology. And I know that we've really upgraded our network over the past few years, but if that's an area where maybe there's some simple explanation for that, maybe there's just there's a local problem we could fix easily.
Okay.
That's why I think things like this are so amazing
Yeah.
because I feel like there's sometimes a lack of communication between students and administrators.
Yeah.
Like something so commonly known, like the lack of Wi-Fi in the Commons for students. You guys just, no one tells you guys, so it's hard for
Yeah,
the
so it's
message to
great
get across.
No, but it's great to visit and
Yeah.
hear these things, because there's always things that we could do to improve the school system. And
Totally.
when students make suggestions like that, then we can make some changes that will help all of you.
Yes. Okay. Let's hear from our next one. Next question.
My name's Kayla, and my question is, why do we have lunch so early in the morning?
It is early. Your school day starts early,
Yes.
but we have a unit lunch. And so prior to a unit lunch, there were multiple lunch periods. Now there's just one. So I do understand that that's early. Really, that's tied to the start time. Right? It's a very early start time, and the unit lunch comes kind of in the middle of your day. And so that's why it is where it is, and that's why it is pretty early. It's really related to the start time and the fact that we start at a little after 7 in the morning.
It kind of sounds like if we pushed back the start time of the school, it would fix a lot of our problems.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that think that start times, and there's research, there's like years and years of people debating about starting school later, right, for high school students, okay? That was something that before the pandemic, there was a study we did, and we also, we collected a lot of community feedback. But in the end, after looking at all the community feedback and looking at the options that we had available, there was a determination that was made that we would stick with the times we had. Some of it had to do with, so if you are a hardworking Wayne Hills student, in a lot of cases, you have a 15 or 16 hour day every day, right? You wake up, you go to school, you have after school activities, you make your way home, you have dinner, and then you have homework. So in many cases, when you add up, when you wake up to when you finish your homework, it's pretty late at night, right? If you start the day a little bit later, it just means you're going to sleep probably a little bit later, right? So the net effect on like the amount of time you have for sleep, I think in certain situations may not be too much of a difference. The other part about it is that there's a lot to be considered when you talk about coordinating the transportation for all the students in the district. So the bottom line is we run about 85 buses every morning, and to get everybody where they need to go and to change that schedule, that's quite an undertaking. Not that there's no reason to do it. I understand that we do have a very early time, and we also looked at the time we did the analysis, there was only one other high school in Passaic County that started the day earlier, and that was West Milford.
And it's only 2 minutes earlier, right?
It's only about 2 minutes, yep, really early. So, I mean, it's something that warrants discussion. The other part about it is a lot of people in the athletic community were very concerned because now when you get out of school, right, most high school athletic competitions start at 4 in the afternoon, right? So just say hypothetically, if you were to get out at like 3:15, so say it was an hour later or so, right? So you get out at 3:15, then you would ultimately be in a real bind to get to wherever you're going if it's an away competition by 4 o'clock. Right? I mean, you could get there, but it's going to be a real hurry, and then you'd have like 2 minutes to warm up, and it would be really hard to get somewhere for a 4 o'clock competition. So for many people in the athletic community, they were concerned about being able to get where they need to get to in a short period of time.
I think it definitely is possible.
Because a lot of other schools do it. Like I was speaking to Mr. Ruick too prior to this, and he was saying that he had kind of like come up with a plan, just an idea to start even at 7:40. And I know like it doesn't really solve the problem about sleep, but even just having those like little bit of extra time in the morning to not have to be in such a rush, I think would just be easier. And I also know like I think like the other thing, like parts of Wayne, like the Board of Office and stuff, like doesn't that open up later than 7:20? Like don't we open up earlier?
It depends which employees.
Okay.
So some do, some start earlier, some start at 7 a.m.
Okay.
Others start at 8. That's the latest anyone starts.
I know the University of Rochester did a little bit of research, obviously on this topic. There's been tons of research, but I was reading this article, and they said that if you wake up, or if you have school before 8:30, if your scheduled start time is before 8:30, it can cause like anxiety and depression and just a whole bunch of things, just because waking up at such an early time, even though if the amount of sleep you're getting is the same, waking up so early just isn't good for your mental health. It isn't good waking up before the sun is up, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's hard, and like I said, I think it's well known. There's all sorts of research that points to the fact that a later start time would be beneficial for high school students. But I don't know that I'm not going to necessarily agree that all these other schools are moving in that direction, particularly in New Jersey. I mean, there could be other states. The other problem I see is if it's something that all schools do, then that would be helpful, because then, for example, the issue of maybe high school athletics starting at 4:30. In other words, if you have a school day that starts at 8:45 or 9 o'clock, and all these other schools have an earlier start time, you have your own set of issues then, right? Because ultimately, even for certain events and for certain special events that other schools host, they start earlier in the day. It would start before your school day starts. So I think that it is really important if it's going to be something that is going to happen. I think for it to work well for everyone, it has to be something where all schools go in that direction. So maybe it's not exact exactly the time, but if you're talking about like an hour or an hour and a half difference in start times between schools, that's a lot of time.
Do you see this as something that could potentially happen in the near future, or do you think this is going to be something that like won't change
Just
for a while?
discussed.
I'm going to say that it's something that has been debated for decades, but in the end, when you get down to, okay, what is it that you actually need to do? Like for our district, we could do some things differently, and we made a determination that we would need to buy another dozen or so buses, right? And that would be normally okay to do, right? I mean, it's an expensive undertaking to buy a dozen buses, but like at a moment like this, where would we get drivers? There's not enough drivers to go
Yeah.
around. We're short a dozen drivers, and no matter what we do, we can't hire them. There's none available. So there's a lot to think about, and like at this moment in time, it would be very hard to pick up, like I said, a dozen buses and all the drivers. But maybe in a few years, that'll stabilize. That'll be better.
It's good to know.
Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ryan. I'm a freshman, and I was wondering why we only have 4 minutes in between classes, because I feel like that's not enough.
I think this question is definitely more geared towards the underclassmen, because I know as an underclassman, for me, this was very difficult. So I just want to know how you feel about that.
Well, I feel that you have kind of the answer to the question. You already gave the answer, right? Once you get to be like a veteran Wayne Hill student, you've been here for a little while, and you know the building a little better, then 4 minutes is enough time to get to where you need to go. But I do understand from a freshman's point of view, Wayne Hills is an enormous building. It has a lot of different hallways and things like that, and it might take time to get used to. So I know when you start here as a freshman, I understand it's a little bit difficult to get where you need to go. But there's a lot of students here, a lot of people here to help you. And I talked to Mr. Ruick about this issue, and he said, listen, at this point, no one has been marked late. No freshman is marked late during the first few weeks of school, because in the end, we don't want to penalize somebody for, okay, they're just lost.
Yeah.
I think you have a very forgiving environment here. Like no one is going to get on anybody who's not sure where they're going or if they're lost.
We definitely do. And like I remember when I came in freshman year, the building seemed so big and scary.
It's enormous.
And now I'm like, it's so small.
It does, when you go to other high schools and you compare it, our school really isn't that big.
Yeah.
But coming from a school, like I went to Schuyler Colfax, and coming here, I'm like, oh my God, like
It's
I don't know
huge.
where I'm going.
It's a big place.
Yes.
I always think, I think it was a pretty big high school. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a long way to walk from one end of the
Yeah.
building to the other, and it's among high schools in the area, it's a pretty big
It's
high
one
school.
of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to the teleprompter?
Now that we have heard some of the student voices around the school, Riya and I have some questions of our own.
While having conversations with our peers, many students have some concerns with the stricter rules being enforced this year.
Our first question is, why are phones being taken away in most classes? Many kids feel like it is a safety hazard not having them on us. So,
Okay.
that's for you.
So, when it comes to rules in the school, I think that what's happening at Wayne Hills is happening in a lot of places, and that many of the students who are attending school this year are attending really, truly for the first time high school the way it was prior to the pandemic, right? And that includes a lot of the rules that we have that people are not used to following. So one of them that's in effect for many years is you're allowed to have a cell phone, you're allowed to have it on your person, but you can't be using it in class. You can't have it out. You can't, because it's a distraction. The bottom line is that you don't need school to use your cell phone. You can do that at some other time. So the idea is that if you're not focused on your schoolwork, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, the cell phone is a constant distraction. So we
Yeah.
want you to be able to get the best education you can, and cell phones do get in the way of that. I think there's nobody who would not recognize that if you have your cell phone out on your desk and you see your text messages and different things on social media popping up, that is definitely a distraction. So the rules about cell phones are really the same rules that existed prior to the pandemic. It's just now they're being enforced. And now, like I said, because we're back to normal, we're back to all the normal rules that existed before the pandemic.
The only thing for me that I like, because I definitely agree they're a distraction. Like personally, I know if I had my phone, I mean, I would get distracted. But I do also see, because I think a lot of students will say, oh, it's a safety hazard, like not having your phone on you in case something happens. Like I think especially like in this like day and age, like because so many things could happen, having your phone on you is, I don't know, like just like it's like a safety thing. And I also feel like at least in college, I know like professors aren't going to be like, oh, put your phone away, put your phone away. It's kind of on you to take that responsibility. So I also feel like it should be on the student to kind of, like make sure that their education is their priority by not going on their phone.
So I don't know if everyone is as responsible.
Yeah,
And you
Riya's
probably
not.
can think of some exceptions yourself, I'm guessing.
Definitely, yeah.
Not everyone is as efficient as you.
Yeah.
Riya.
Okay, should we move on to the next? Okay. So to continue our discussion about rules, many students feel that the stricter gym rules seem a bit extreme. Why are the doors being shut after 5 minutes and students are not allowed to participate after those 5 minutes?
Okay.
Okay,
So I think students who attended Wayne Hills 5 years ago would probably have a very quick explanation for that, and that is because the doors are locked because things get stolen.
Yep.
And so that is the unfortunate reality, is that sometimes people leave their things unattended, and if the doors are open and people can go in and out and there's no supervision, then things get stolen. So that's one issue.
Okay.
Two, there is an obligation of the school to supervise students at all times. And so if you're in a space and you're not supervised, then the school's not doing what it's supposed to do. So those are really the two big things about why the doors are closed and why there's a timeline on it. Ultimately, the goal is to get in, get changed, get out, and do your class.
What if you play a sport though? Because I heard that if you don't make it in those 5 minutes and you don't participate in gym, or if you don't have your gym shirt now, that you can't play if you have a game later that day. And I just feel like sometimes things happen, like it's natural to be late, and I think it's natural to also forget your gym shirt sometimes. Right. And I don't know if the right repercussion is to not be able to play in a game because you made a mistake.
Well, I would say it would be important if you're in that situation there's got to be some spare shirts around that you might want to bring with you. But the other part about it is, like I said, I think we have some very understanding staff members who are here. So is there an actual example of somebody who was in that boat that actually wasn't allowed to?
I have an
I don't have
example.
one, yeah.
I have an example. It's kind of different, but it actually happened to me today.
Okay.
I was wearing jeans
Yeah.
for class, and I have a field hockey game later today.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get a 0 and be like late, so I put on my shorts that I have for gym. We went outside. It was
Freezing.
40 degrees
It's a
outside.
little cold out there.
So
Yeah.
I was in shorts for the 40-degree weather just because I didn't want to get marked a 0 or
Don't wanna
not be
get a
able to play
0.
in my field hockey game.
Right. So that's, again, you're very responsible. And I don't know that everybody would take that step, but yeah, so we have these rules, and like I said, if you were to, to talk to the administration, you might want to take that up a little bit more with Mr. Roy to talk about how that would happen. But I would venture to say there's very few or if any people that can say that, like, in the end, they wound up not being able to compete
Yeah.
because of something that happened in PE.
Yeah.
Or you are required, and I understand the connection. The reality of having someone like really not compete, there'd probably be some warnings and some other things. So if there was someone like that, I'm sure there's probably some things that led up to that.
It really hasn't even come up. I think this is a new thing that I've heard, because
Yeah.
I heard like a lot about like the gym like administration or rules changing. I'm not really sure. So I feel like until we get to that point, like we don't really know, because maybe
Yeah.
this is just something they're saying to really try to get students to wear their shirts, and I don't know if they would actually like enforce that.
Yeah,
So
so it does sound like, from what you're saying here, it sounds pretty harsh, and like I said, I would be surprised.
yeah. Okay.
Speaking about being late, do you think the excessive amount of students coming in late due to the early start time?
I would venture to say that there are probably some students that come to school late because we have an early start time.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that. I think even if we had if you started at 9 o'clock, there'd still be students that would come in late. But as it stands, I do think the early start time probably contributes to some more cases.
Yeah.
Moving on to a more academic aspect of our school,
Okay.
a question we had was, do you think our district provides us with enough knowledge to be financially successful in our early adulthood? Why are classes like financial literacy not required as a senior but as a freshman?
Okay, so I'm going to say that financial literacy is actually not required as a freshman. I think that it is a high school graduation requirement, and I think that a lot of schools really encourage students to take it because ultimately you probably have other things you're probably going to want to be doing in your later years. However, there is you are right about the whole issue of timing, right? Like in the end, when you're a freshman, you are not walking onto a college campus. You more than likely don't have a checkbook, and you're probably not in a situation where you're tempted to sign up for a credit card or 5 credit cards or whatever.
Yep.
So having that understanding of a little bit more about the financial literacy at a time when you're really going to need to know more, probably would be a better way of timing out that course. It seems like that would make a lot of sense to me.
Maybe there could be a class specifically for seniors that isn't as demanding academically because our senior schedule is so crazy.
It's tough, yeah.
That really prepares us for going into college and being financially pretty much on our own.
Yeah.
Even if it was like a half year, I think just like a refresher, like a
Yeah.
review would just be really, really helpful. Because I know, like Becca mentioned earlier, like on the Common App, like filling out the FAFSA
Yeah.
forms.
Right.
It can be like chaotic and a little stressful, and I think having that class would really, really help.
So we have a goal this year. So our goal, so there's a number of goals we have for the district, but one of them is about promoting student post-secondary success, right? Doing what we can to make sure that everyone who attends our school system at the high school level, right, goes on, graduates, and what we do here puts you in the best position to be successful. So maybe what we could do is we can add that as one of our activities, like looking and analyzing what courses and when we deliver those courses, and how some of that, if we change that up a little bit, might be helpful to you as you leave Wayne Hills.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Continuing on with academics, many seniors feel that it is unfair that enriched classes are beginning to become weighted. How is that fair to the upperclassmen who have done the same work for less credit?
It's a good question. And the only thing I could say about that is if you think about it in terms of like an athletic competition and you change the rules after the game was played, it's hard to go back, right? It's not, and so things would be different, but people made decisions about what classes they were going to take based on the rules that existed at the time. And so we looked at what other districts do in terms of if you adjust the weighting of grades, how does that work? And so in none of the cases did we see schools going backwards and awarding credit or weight for classes that were in the past. It's only something that is really for if like going forward.
Just out of curiosity, like, have you heard anything? Like, have people reached out to you and been like, "This is unfair," like parents or students?
So what happened is there was a committee.
Okay.
So this was not just something the superintendent does in isolation. There were people who actually came forward to complain, like, "Hey, it's not fair." On the other side of it, that we are doing coursework that is above and beyond, and so these classes should have more weight to them. So it was a minor adjustment of 0.25, right? So it's not a huge change, of 0.25, and kind of consistent with what some other schools do. They have this small bump for those types of classes for the enriched, and so that's how it kind of happened. So have I heard complaints from, like, I did probably receive one or two complaints from students asking about, well, hey, how comes I took these classes in prior years, I should get the weight too. So I understand that.
I think it is kind of something that we just have to learn to deal with because the change is really great. I think getting the credit for this class, even though, like you said, it is so small, 0.25, but if you're taking all enriched classes, it does add up. Yeah.
It helps. And we're going to look at the weighting of all of our classes this year. So we want to be, again, in position where we want to put you in the best position to be successful with college admissions and things like that. So we need to look at how all of our calculations are made when we determine GPA.
Yeah.
Okay, so finally, we wanted to talk to you about the new Crosswalk. The Crosswalk is a really great and safe addition to our school.
Tell us about the new Crosswalk. How has it had a positive effect on students during lunch and after school? Have there been any negative effects? What was the response?
Okay. So what I would say is this, that I certainly don't see that there's any negative effects. And I know that I myself, once the crosswalk was built, I walked along Birdhane Avenue, and it was a little bit frightening because you see these cars, they're moving fast. And so you picture at that curve, people jogging across the street to the shopping center. That is very dangerous. So I think there's nothing but good that came from that. I think that the students of Wayne Hills, we still have the bus. So the bottom line is the bus is always a nice thing, and maybe as the weather gets worse, it'll help people too. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's a huge safety enhancement. It makes everyone a lot safer, especially if you're walking across the street.
I think the bus and the crosswalk, because like these are both things that got added when we at our time here. I think they're both like really, really great things.
They are beneficial.
Yeah, they're really like, I can't think of anything bad either, because that run across is, as a senior who drives now and like understanding what it's like being in the driver's seat and seeing these people go running across, like
Scary.
it's so scary for the driver and for them. So I think it's a really, really great addition to the school.
It was nice. The township did a really nice job in working with, there's the officials that are responsible for the reservoir, right? So that's part of it. So they gave up that land where the fence is, and they moved the fence back, so they paid for that. The township paid for the sidewalk. The Board of Ed agreed to pay for the for the maintenance. In other words, we'll plow or we'll shovel snow and things like that, so we'll maintain it. And but that's basically it. So it's a lot of different people looking to make sure that the students here are safe.
Yeah.
Going off about our conversation about the crosswalk, we know that the crosswalk has been beneficial for students during lunch. But going on about lunchtime, why are school lunches not free anymore? They were very accessible last year and helped a lot of students out. What changed?
What changed is that there was a federal program that the district had in place that came to an end.
Okay.
Okay, so it's that simple.
Okay.
That was really, that was supported by federal funds. However, the district is looking to take another step in direction to help people with food security, make sure people have lunch when they in the event they're having a hard time financially. So we have a regular free and reduced lunch program, but now next year, the state of New Jersey is making some changes to increase, there's an income restriction that is in place now, and they're looking to change that next year to make lunch more available, free or reduced lunches more available to students. And we're looking to really take a step to maybe do that this year, early, before it's required, and that will help students. So that's a really nice thing that the school district is doing to help people if there's a need.
Yep.
Was the program for like post-COVID, was that why? Okay.
Yep, COVID
Do you know
related.
if, because students are paying for their own lunches now, is that increasing the quality of the lunches?
You tell me.
Well, I don't buy lunch, but I
You know?
remember last year I was going over when we were talking about
It
this.
was I saw the dreaded corn dog
Yeah,
photo.
the beans. So
Yeah.
hopefully the increase in lunch isn't just a price increase, but a quality increase.
I think the other part about it is if you look at the situation, it's not necessarily, I mean, I guess maybe there was some concerns about quality, but there's also the way food is served. If everything's in a styrofoam box and it gets jostled around and things like that, now that's not the way food is served because of COVID. You're able to have your normal serving lines, and so it's not quite as it's not as prepackaged as what it was. Because sometimes when things are prepackaged, they settle. They wind up all bunched together, like everything winds up bunched together.
They don't look as appetizing.
It doesn't look as
definitely.
appetizing. And I think the other part is like when you open a styrofoam tray sometimes, maybe that's not as appetizing as well.
Okay, well, that's all the questions we have
Okay,
for you
it's a lot of
today.
questions. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Toback, and for answering all of our questions.
We truly appreciate you having this discussion with us, and we are looking forward to having you back at Wayne Hills TV soon.
Thanks for watching the first student voice of the 2022 to 2023 school year.
Here to make your voices heard, this is Becca
And Riya.
signing off.